The prison guard who helped a convict escape, then vanished without a trace. Vicki Monroe was the kind of officer you trusted with your life. That's what her co-workers at Lauderdale County Jail used to say, until the morning she vanished with one of the most dangerous inmates in Alabama. April 22, 2024, began like any other Friday. The guards clocked in, the radios crackled, and the morning shift rolled into place. Vicki, 44 years old and just weeks away from early retirement, arrived early as usual. Her uniform was pressed, her hair neatly pinned, her badge shining under the fluorescent lights. She had a reputation for being calm under pressure, the kind of officer who could de-escalate a riot with just her voice. That morning she signed out a white Ford Patrol SUV and a single inmate, Casey Wilder, a 35-year-old serving 75 years for armed robbery and assault. The logbook showed mental evaluation as the destination. No one questioned it. Vicki had done hundreds of transports before. But this one was different. The security camera caught them leaving the Sally Port at exactly 9:37 a.m. Casey was handcuffed, shackled, and walking calmly beside her. The footage showed her holding the door for him, an almost tender gesture that no one noticed until later. She smiled. He nodded. They drove off, heading toward the courthouse. They never arrived. Hours later, the jail tried calling her radio. No answer. Then her phone. Straight to voicemail. The courthouse said no transport had been scheduled that day. That's when the panic began. Within 24 hours, the manhunt started. News channels across the country picked up the story. Veteran corrections officer disappears with convicted felon. Every network replayed that same 10-second footage. Her calm walk, his quiet smirk, the white SUV fading out of frame. Investigators dug into her background and found something that shattered the department's faith in her. 4 months she'd been visiting Casey in isolation, far more often than protocol allowed. She'd volunteered for extra shifts in his block. The security logs showed late-night visits, after the other staff had gone home. One guard remembered walking into the control room one evening and finding her watching the security monitor showing Casey's cell. "He's not like the others," she had said softly. "He's misunderstood." When the FBI searched her house, they found it stripped. Furniture sold. Car title transferred. Bank accounts emptied. Her neighbor said she'd mentioned moving away soon, but never said where. What no one could explain was why. Vicki wasn't desperate. She wasn't in debt. She had friends, family, a good pension coming. But she had one secret no one saw, a hidden phone number saved under the name Carl M. The last text she ever sent was to that number, 2 hours before the escape. Read, "It's time. We're doing it today." By the time the U.S. Marshals traced the SUV, it was found abandoned in a shopping center parking lot 2 counties over. The security footage there showed the pair switching cars. A rusted orange Ford Edge Vicki had bought days earlier under a fake name. Then nothing. No trace on credit cards, no cell signals, no witnesses. They had vanished into thin air. As the manhunt stretched into the second week, a chilling theory started to spread online, that maybe Vicki hadn't been running at all. Maybe she'd been trapped long before that day. Maybe Casey had found a way to manipulate her from the inside, turning her loyalty into obsession. But one thing was certain. When she drove away from that jail, Vicki Monroe stopped being a guard. She became a fugitive, one the entire country was now desperate to find. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for the country to turn Vicki Monroe into a ghost story. Every news anchor had her face on their screen, the officer who ran away with a killer. Talk shows debated whether she was in love or under threat. And across America, highways were dotted with billboards flashing her picture beside Casey Wilder's mugshot. Wanted. Armed and dangerous. But out there, somewhere between the Alabama state line and the Tennessee woods, Vicki and Casey were still on the move. It started as a straight drive north, switching cars twice and ditching phones at every state border. Vicki had planned this for months, down to the smallest detail. Cash withdrawals below reporting limits, prepaid phones under false IDs, even a bag of hair dye in the back seat. But what she didn't plan for was the silence. The long, tense hours with Casey sitting beside her, watching her every move through the reflection in the window. "Where are we headed?" he finally asked. "Somewhere no one's looking," she said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. He smirked. "You sure you're not the one running from something?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Deep down, she knew this wasn't just an escape, it was a confession. 4 months, she'd listened to Casey talk about the world outside, how unfair the system was, how people like them were trapped by walls that others couldn't see. Somewhere along the way she started believing him. But the reality of being on the run was different from the fantasy. Every gas station felt like a spotlight. Every news report they caught on the motel TV was a reminder of what she'd done. And Casey, the man she thought she knew, was changing. The charming, soft-spoken inmate she'd met behind bars was gone. In his place was someone colder. Someone who liked control. At one motel near Evansville, Indiana, she caught him going through her bag. "Looking for the cash," he said, shrugging. "You don't think I'm stupid, do you?" That night she didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, the dull hum of the air conditioner masking her heartbeat. When she reached into her jacket, she felt the small pistol she'd taken from the evidence room, her last safety net. By morning she made a decision. She would take him to a safe house she mentioned, an old cabin near the Tennessee-Kentucky border, and figure out what to do from there. Maybe turn herself in. Maybe run alone. But Casey had other plans. He noticed her hesitation, the trembling hands, the way she flinched every time a police cruiser passed by. He started calling her officer again, not Vicky. "You think you can just walk away from this?" he said, voice low and venomous. "You're in it now. You're one of us." The fear in her eyes confirmed it. Somewhere between loyalty and love, she had become his hostage. That evening, as they crossed the narrow bridge toward the cabin, dark clouds rolled in. Thunder cracked over the mountains. And for the first time since they'd fled, Vicky pulled over, her eyes wet with regret. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. Casey leaned close, his voice chillingly calm. "It never is." Hours later, locals near the state park reported hearing gunshots echoing through the rain. But when authorities arrived the next day, the cabin was empty. Inside they found a half-burned map, a duffel bag full of cash, and Vicky's badge melted in the fireplace. 2 miles away, a witness claimed to have seen a man limping through the woods alone, drenched in blood. By the time law enforcement reached that area, the trail had gone cold again. But the story was far from over. Because a week later, a truck driver pulled into a rest stop near the Kentucky border and noticed a woman sitting alone at a picnic table, her hands trembling, her eyes red and swollen. When he asked if she needed help, she said nothing, just handed him a folded note that read, "Tell them I never meant for any of this." Then, before he could ask another question, she disappeared into the woods behind the rest stop, leaving behind only her silver cross necklace in the dirt. By the time authorities found the woman's note at the Kentucky rest stop, the manhunt had stretched into its third week. U.S. Marshals, state police, and the FBI were all involved now. Hundreds of miles of back roads and woodlands had been combed. Still, no sign of Vicky Monroe. But something shifted when a farmer outside Lexington reported seeing a rusted orange Ford Edge hidden behind an abandoned barn. When deputies arrived, they knew instantly what they'd found. The VIN matched the car Vicky had bought under the alias Carla Morris. The vehicle's doors were unlocked. Inside they found 2 empty fast food wrappers, a half-empty water bottle, and blood on the steering wheel. In the back seat, a handgun wiped clean of prints. And on the passenger side floor, a folded photograph. It showed Vicky, smiling, standing beside Casey Wilder in his orange jumpsuit. The picture had been taken inside the jail months earlier. But what caught everyone's attention was what was written on the back. "We were free for a moment." It was the break investigators needed. Blood analysis confirmed it belonged to Casey. Within days, a search team discovered a trail leading into the dense woods behind the barn. Footprints, one set larger and heavier, dragging slightly as if limping. They followed the trail to an old storm drain beneath a rural road. That's where they found him. Casey Wilder was barely alive, suffering from a gunshot wound to the abdomen. When officers pulled him out, he muttered one sentence before losing consciousness. "She didn't make it." The words sent chills through the entire investigation team. When Casey woke up in the hospital under heavy guard, the questioning began. He told a story full of holes. That Vicky had panicked during an argument at the cabin, that she'd shot him and fled into the storm, that he hadn't seen her since. But detectives noticed something strange. Every time her name was mentioned, he smiled. A search of the nearby woods turned up burned remnants of clothing, a torn prison map, and tire marks leading toward the river. Then, about half a mile downstream, searchers found a single item lodged between the rocks, Vicky's Alabama Department of Corrections badge. Forensic teams scoured the riverbanks for days, but no body was ever recovered. The public went into overdrive. True crime forums, podcasts, and YouTube channels spun theories faster than investigators could respond. Some said Casey killed her and dumped the body. Others claimed she escaped and was living under a new identity. A few believed she'd planned the whole thing, to vanish cleanly and leave the world guessing. The FBI kept the case open for 6 months before officially listing Vicki Monroe as missing, presumed deceased. Casey was convicted of additional charges, including escape and aggravated assault, earning him a life sentence without parole. Yet even behind bars, the story didn't end. 2 years later, a journalist writing a book on the case received an anonymous envelope in the mail. Inside was a keycard from a roadside motel in southern Georgia, room 12, and a note that simply said, "Some prisons don't have bars." When the journalist arrived at the motel, the manager confirmed the keycard matched a guest who had stayed there under the name V. Morris. No photo ID, paid in cash, stayed one night, left before dawn. Security footage from that night showed only a shadowy figure wearing a baseball cap, walking across the parking lot and disappearing behind a line of trucks. The face wasn't clear, but the stride, the build, even the way the person turned their head, all matched one thing. It looked exactly like Vicki Monroe. Whether she survived that storm or staged her own vanishing act, no one could prove. But to this day, every few months, another tip surfaces: a sighting at a gas station, a woman with the same scar on her hand, the same nervous glance at police cruisers. And each time the marshals check. Each time it's inconclusive. Because maybe Vicki Monroe didn't die that night. Maybe she just traded one kind of prison for another, the kind you carry with you mile after mile, road after road, until freedom no longer feels like freedom at all.